Hello juniors, today we're gonna finish with the second part of electronic assignment 20, which is solving quadratic equations. Remember from last class we studied, first of all we defined what solving a quadratic function really means, which if you remember it's to find the values where f of x is 0, and that's the same as finding the x-intercepts, or also called roots, or also called solutions, and also called one name that I forgot, but that is normally used as well, is zeros. Zeros of the equation. That's also the x-intercepts, okay? Then we've seen the four different types of solving quadratic equations, which are solving by factorization, solving by computing the square, applying the quadratic formula, and using GDC. In the last class, we did exercises about the first two, okay? So today we're gonna focus on these two forms, which for me are the easiest to understand, but not necessarily the most convenient. The quadratic formula is super easy, it's just an application of formula, but it might take you some time, and it's not something that will help you save by some time. And using GDC, the problem with this is that you're not always allowed to use GDC. So in case you're not allowed to use GDC, then you should master the other three techniques, okay? In case you're allowed to use GDC, then maybe this method would be the best as it is the quickest. Okay, so let's go to the first problem before doing a problem about the quadratic formula. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the origin of the quadratic formula. Have you ever wondered where this formula, the famous quadratic formula, comes from? Minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. You have always been taught about this formula, but maybe you've never seen where it comes from. So I prepared a very short investigation here, which you could see in detail on your own. I'll try to cover all of this, but a little bit quick in order to not make this video too long. And basically the formula comes from completing the square, which is what we saw yesterday, right? So pay attention. This is the general form of a quadratic function, right? My objective in order to find the quadratic formula is to solve for x, that is, leave the x alone. But the problem is that I have x squared here and another x over here, so it's a little bit difficult to solve, to leave the x alone, right? So I will need to apply the completing the square technique in order to be able to solve for x. So the first thing we do is, since we have a value here, a, which is different from 1, which is what we need, we're gonna start by dividing the whole equation by a, okay? Which is the first step you see here. We divide everything by a. So step number 1, divide both sides of the equation by a. Then in step number 2, you see that I just took this value to the other side as a negative. So that's what we do. Subtract c over a from both sides of the equation. Then step number 3, you see that I'm doing this in order to complete the square. Now I need to add a value here that will let me complete the square, which is exactly this value over here. It says x squared plus b over ax plus. And remember the rule. We need to halve this term, or this coefficient, halve this, and the result square it, okay? And that's exactly what you see here. It's b over a, and we multiply it by 1/2. This is the same as saying this over 2, the same thing. And then we square that result. Remember, we're doing that in order to complete the square, okay? So remember that anything that I add to one side of the equation, I must add to the other side in order to keep the equation. So this is what we do. We complete the square by adding the square of half the coefficient of x to both sides of the equation. That's what we just did. Then, what is the next step? Step number 4. It says simplify 1 over 2 times b over a squared and reorder the terms on the right hand side of the equation. So we just simplify this and we reorder these terms. Then, next step, step number 5, it says, find a common denominator on the right side of the equation. You see that we have this subtraction over here. So in order to be able to subtract one fraction from another, I need to find a common denominator between these two terms. And the common denominator is 4a squared, okay? So by applying, and you see that here, I already completed the square. So this is equal to this that you see over here, x plus b over a squared. We already completed the square in that side. And in this side, I did a common denominator. So remember the rule. It's 4a squared divided by 4a, that's 1, times b squared, that gives us this b squared over here. And then 4a squared divided by this a over here gives us 4a, and 4a times c is 4ac, which is what we have here. Okay? So we just find the common denominator and rewrite the expression. Finally, you see that we almost have the x solved now. This is the only x we have in the whole equation. So what are we missing in order to have the x alone? We need to first take the square root of this and then take this subtracting to the other side. And that's how we will get the quadratic formula. So step number 7 says, take the square root of both sides of the equation. That's what I just told you. We take the square root here, and we get this on this side and this on the other side. You see that the square root of 4a squared is 2a, right? That's why you have 2a here. So then, once we took the square root, the last step is to take this to the other side, and it will be negative because it's positive here. So we finally get the famous quadratic formula, which is that one over there. So step number 8, solve for x. That's leave the x alone. And this is where the formula comes from. Obviously, you don't need to know this. I'm just showing you this for you to be able to understand where it comes from. And I don't know, maybe if you're just curious to know. Okay, so question 9 says, what is the result of completing the square for the general equation that we get? The result is we get the quadratic formula, right? The quadratic formula. And then 10 says, could you use this formula to find roots of any quadratic equation? And yes, the good thing about this formula, the good thing about this formula is that this formula is applicable to any type of equation. So if it's presented this way, or maybe if we are not sure if we can apply a factoring case or whatever, we can always use this formula to solve any type of quadratic equation. So that's the good thing about this method, which is that it is applicable anytime. It doesn't matter the equation we get. Okay, this formula is available in the formula booklet. Let me show you, just a second. If we go to the formula booklet, you'll see that here you have the quadratic formula. We also have the general form of a quadratic equation, the quadratic formula, and this is something that we're going to see in the next classes. It's called discriminant. Okay, so let's see 2 examples about this before going to the last technique, which is using GDC. And this is pretty easy. You just need to remember the formula, which is available in the formula booklet. Let me write it here. X equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, right? So the only thing you need to do is identify a, b, and c in each case. So if we do exercise A, from this equation over here, the value of a is 1, the value of b is 4, and the value of c is negative 6. Remember, and I will write that here. We take those values from this general form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, right? So that's why a is 1, b is 4, c is negative 6. Okay, so we apply the quadratic formula and we will get x equals. minus b, that's minus 4, plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4, a is 1, c is negative 6, over 2 times 1. We're going to try to solve this without using calculator. So this would give us x equals negative 4 plus or minus. This is 16. 4 times 6, that's 24. So this would be plus 24 over 2. If we keep on doing this, this would be x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 24. That's a 40, right? Yes, that's 40. So square root of 40 over 2. How do we take the square root of a number without using a calculator? Remember I showed you that last class? We just need to find the prime divisors of 40. Okay, so if we decompose this into its prime divisor, we get 2, 20, 2, 10, 2, 5, 5, 1. So we get that 40 is the same as saying 2 to the third power times 5. So that means that we can take 1, 2 out of the square root, and we would get 2 square root of 2 times 5, which is 10. 2 square root of 10 would be the square root of 40. Okay? So let me show that step here for you to understand. Negative 4 plus or minus, this is the square root of 2 to the third power times 5 over 2. So this is equal to x equals negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 2 times 5, that gives us 10 over 2. There you go. So there are two possible results. Let me see if I can, maybe I'll take this down a little bit just to have more space. There you go. So one answer would be using the positive sign. This would be negative 4 plus 2 root 10 over 2. Before doing that, you see that we can simplify the 2. This 2 with this 4, this gives us negative 2, and the same 2 with this. This would be 1, okay? So this is the same as saying negative 2 plus or minus root 10, okay? So the two possible results would be, the first one is negative 2 plus root 10, and the second result is negative 2 minus root 10. These are the two results of this quadratic equation. Okay, so now let's do part B. I'm going to do this using a different color to avoid confusion. B. Once again, we need to identify a value of A, which in this case is 2, B is negative 3, and C. Pay attention with the value of C. We first need to take it to the other side, right? So let me do that first here. This would be 2x squared minus 3x minus 7 equals 0. So then we can take the value of C, which is negative 7. Once again, we apply the quadratic formula, and this would be minus 3 again, plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared minus 4 times A times C square root over 2 times 2. So if we solve this out, this would be positive 3 plus or minus This is 9. 8 times 7, that's 56. So this is plus 56. Square root here, divided by 4. So this is the same as saying 3 plus or minus 9 plus 56. That's 65. Square root of 65 over 4. Okay. Let's see if we can decompose 65. 65 is not divisible by 2. It's not divisible by 3 either. It's divisible by 5. 65 divided by 5, that's 13. Yes, 13. And then 13. No, so we cannot break down 65, so we would just leave it as it is. So the two possible results would be 3 plus root 65 over 4, and the other possible result would be 3 minus root 65 over 4. These are the two solutions of this particular equation. Okay, so that's how you use the quadratic formula. It's pretty simple, but you see that we get some tough calculations that we need to do, and that's why it's not usually recommended to solve this way, because it's easy to get a mistake, and it's also a little bit long to make all of these calculations. Okay, finally, we're gonna see the fourth method, which is using the graphic display calculator. There are two ways to solve quadratic equations using a calculator. The first one is to graph and finding points of intersection, and the second form is by solving the polynomial, and I'm going to show you both ways. I'm going to do one way in the first example and the other way in the second example. Okay, so let's see part A. It says, find the points of intersection of the graphs f of x equals 4x squared minus 2x minus 5 and gx. Okay, so let me copy those two functions, 4x squared minus 2x minus 5 and gx equals 3x plus 2. Okay, so we want to find the point of intersection. That's also known as the solution of these two equations. So let me show you how to do this using the calculator. Just give me a second. Okay, so now if you look at the calculator, and in order to do this, we would go to menu graph. I'm going to delete these two equations, and I'm going to write the two equations, which are 4x squared minus 2x minus 5, and the other one is 3x plus 2. Those are the two equations. So we draw this f6, and there you have both graphs. Maybe my scale is not correct, so I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm going to put from negative 10 to 10, scale 1. Same thing for y, negative 10 to 10, scale 1. Let's see if this works. Draw. Yes, so here I see both points of intersection. So this would be one solution, this would be the other solution. So how do we find that? Shift, G solve, intersect, okay? F5. So there you have, this is the first point of intersection, and if you click on the arrow, you'll get the second point of intersection over here. So these two values of x are the solutions of this equation. So let me copy the values of x, and those will be the solutions. So if we go back to the electronic assignment now, I'm gonna write the steps graph and find points of intersection, basically. So you see that this is a very quick and easy way to solve quadratic equations. So the first solution was x equals negative 0.83 0.38, and the other solution was x equals 2.09. Okay, so that's how we quickly solve using a calculator, using the graphing method. Okay, for part B, I'm gonna use the same orange I used here. We're gonna solve the exercise in part B by applying the second method we can do in the calculator, which is solving the polynomial. It says solve x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 11. So I'm going to write x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 11. And the first thing I need to do in order to solve by this method is to take this 11 to the other side and set this equation to 0. Okay, so if I take it to the other side, I'll get x squared plus 10x. 25 minus 11, that's 14, equals 0. And then, let me show you this in the calculator. If you see a calculator now, let me go back to the menu. If we go to menu, equation, this one over here, you click execute. And then here you have the option for polynomial, right? So click on F2, degree, as we're talking about quadratic equations, we're going to put degree 2, F1, and then you plug in the coefficients of the equation. In our case, the coefficient in front of the x squared is 1, coefficient in front of the x is 10, and the independent term is 14. So once you plugged in all the values, you click on execute, and there you have. One solution is -5 plus root 11, and the other one would be -5 minus root 11. Okay, so if we go back to the electronic assignment, let me write those steps. We go to menu, equation, polynomial, and you already know what to do then. So the two results are x equals negative 5 plus root 11, which if you want to write in decimals, this is equal to negative 1.68, and the other value of x is -5 minus root 11, which if you write using decimals, it would be -8.32. Okay, one thing I wanted to show you for this particular exercise is that you can also solve this using the graphing method. I just want to show you that you'll get the same result. So if you look at the calculator once again now, if we go to menu graph, let me erase these two equations for a second, and I'll write I'm gonna write the two equations given in exercise B. So the first one is a quadratic function, which is x squared plus 10x plus 25, and the other one, if you remember from the exercise, the equation was x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 11. So that 11 is what I'm going to write here as a second equation, which if you remember, this is the equation of a horizontal line, right? So if we draw this, F6, you see that, well, you don't see the horizontal line because there it is, it's up there. So the two intersections between these graphs are the solutions of this. So just for you to check, you see that you'll get the same results. Shift G solve, intersect, and you get -8.32, which is the first value we obtained, and the second value, -1.68, which is also the other value we obtained. So you can solve it either by graphing or by applying the polynomial equation in the calculator. So if we go back now to the electronic assignment, we're gonna finish this class by looking at a real-life application of quadratic equations. Maybe you're asking yourself, how do you use quadratic equations in real life? And this is a very practical example. and this is widely used for people who study maybe administración de empresas or economics or comercio internacional. All of those careers have a lot of this. Okay, so let's read what this is about. So it says, break-even point, profit, revenue, and costs are 4 related business concepts. What does each of these terms mean? Okay, so break-even point is basically the point where my profit is the same. Sorry, my profit is zero, and my revenue is the same as my cost. This is something that maybe you are studying in business with Mr. Rich. So profit is my utility or my ganancia, we would say, right? And it's basically calculated by doing revenue minus costs, right? Revenue are all my ingresos, right? All of the money I can gain through the sale of my products. And costs are all the costos of producing or offering a specific product or service. Okay, so why would business owners want to find break-even points? What do you think this is important? This is important because the business owner can know what is the minimum amount of production of any product or service that the enterprise must do in order to gain money, right? So that's why it's very important to know this break-even point, because it's the minimum point that will give you a little bit of profit, right? Okay. So the problem says, the publisher of a newsletter uses the following models to estimate the monthly revenue, that's the income, and monthly cost, C. Cost and revenue are in thousands of euros, and X is the number of subscribers in thousands. So here you have the equation for the revenue, the equation for the cost. These two equations in real life can be taken through historical data of the enterprise. So you can analyze your product sales, your costs, and all of that. And through all of that information, you can write or establish equations that would model your income and costs. So how would you find the number of subscribers that determines the break-even point? So remember, the break-even point is the point where my profit is zero, okay? Profit is la utilidad, that's in Spanish, right? Profit is zero, and profit, remember that profit is calculated. Profit is calculated by doing revenue minus costs, right? My income minus my expenses, right? So if my profit is zero, then what will happen? If this is zero, this is revenue minus costs, then what I obtain is that my cost equals my revenue. That's the condition for a break-even point, okay? This is what we call break-even point. When my costs equals my revenue. So what do I need to do? I need to equate these two equations over here. So this is cost is 300 plus 15x equals 35x minus 0.25x squared. And then we need to solve this, and we can solve it using whichever technique we want. We already know 4. So let me do this by let me solve this by graphing this in the calculator. I'm going to graph these two and find the intersection point. So if we go back now to the calculator, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to erase this once again. And I'm going to write the cost function, 300 plus 15x, and the revenue equation, which is 35x minus 0.25 x squared. If we draw this, f6, okay, we don't see this because of the scale, but let's see if I can zoom out of this. Yeah, there you can kind of see the, let me change this, shift V win. I'm gonna put big numbers here. Negative 1,000 to 1,000, 1,000, 100. This should be negative 1,000. 1,000, 1,000, 100. There you go. And y means same thing. Negative 1,000, 1,000, 100. There you go. So let's try now. And here we cannot. There. Here we can see the break-even points, which are the points in which these graphs intersect. So if we go to Shift G solve intersect, F5, we get one point here, which is at 20. So if we have 20 subscribers and we're at break-even point, and let's see if there's another intersection point. Yes, there's another at 60. So for those two values of x, I'm at the break-even point. So if I go back to the electronic assignment, I'm going to write the two values. So using GDC, we get that x equals 20 and x equals 60. Though these 2 points, or these two amounts of subscribers, let me put subscribers here, subscribers. For these two amounts of subscribers, I'm gonna get a break-even point. So my profit will be 0, okay? So that's it, people, for today's class. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any doubts, please let me know, okay? See you.